3D printing in Airsoft is becoming the new meme. Just 3D print it, mate, is what you probably hear. And this video is probably for you because I'm here to talk about the pros and cons of printing 3D printed parts, or even to the point of 3D printing entire Airsoft replicas. Now, when you first start looking at 3D printed parts for Airsoft, it's all over the internet, whether it's cults, whether it's printables, whether it's the dreaded site of Thingiverse. Now, there is some cool good things out there. My favourite has been the Mosquito that's on printables, free to download, takes a V3 gearbox, and I put a Kythera engine in it, and it were absolutely amazing. But I learned a lot from printing that gun and playing with that gun. The big thing with 3D printing is everybody likes to print things without supports because it's easier for cleanup. There's less work involved. For example, I'm showing you on this barrel extension. If you print it up like this, you get loads of little circles, but that makes it weaker. If you lay it down, you get in a very large oval. So when you support this, it makes it structurally a lot more stronger. The other issue to this is learning to support on FDM. It's nothing like resin printing that I've found. Auto supports are terrible. This could be the slicer that I'm using, but at the end of the day, I'm quite new to this, and if you're watching this video thinking about 3D printing for Airsoft, you're going to be in this same position. There's a big learning curve. Now, adding a load of supports to the bottom of an FDM print, it's not a big job. It's actually quite therapeutic if you're into that sort of thing. But you've got a huge cleanup step afterwards. They do kind of peel off, but you get loads of little nubs and loads of little things that you need to polish clean. And if you're into 3D printing Airsoft parts and you're wanting them to look good, this is the bit that I really don't like about FDM printing. Even if you have a very neat, very nice looking 3D print when you're done, you still need to do the prep work. And even with the best settings in the best environment, it's basically a glorified hot glue gun. And any temperature change in your room, if the bed sort of drops in temperature, if something happens, you're gonna get little lines or little areas of the print that are not equal. And as you can see with this print as it's going along, it's relatively smooth, but there's still inconsistencies there, and it's slightly failed because my supports have failed. But let's get to prepping some actual successful parts to show you the work that goes into it to make it look okay, is what I'll say. I like to start with a rasp. The reason I like to start with a rasp is because it can get rid of some of the bigger lines and deviations in the actual print. And then once you've actually got them relatively flat to the rest of the piece, you can use the big flat area of the rasp to slide over and then really smooth out them circles is the best way to describe them. Just literally keep rubbing over the top till you feel it smooth to touch. Your fingers can feel the smallest deviations. So if you keep doing this, basically it took me about 20 minutes to get to this point, which is still nowhere near perfect. I do wipe it with alcohol, and the reason I'm using alcohol is because the next step, you need it to be completely moisture free. If you want to use water, you can do, but you'll have to leave this to dry over the course of an hour or so. But alcohol is great because it evaporates in a couple of minutes, meaning you can go into this next step and you're not going to have any issues. Once that's kind of dried up, you can start feeling to see if there's any other inconsistencies in the print. I like to double check before I start to do the next step because it's a good way to do it, because as soon as you start putting the next step on, you're adding more work. So this first sanding, even though it's a very rough sand, you are just looking for any slight razors or inconsistencies to get rid of them. Once you've done that, let's get on to coating this thing in polyurethane resin. Now, the best thing with polyurethane resin, it's got a very, very quick pot life. So basically what it means is as soon as you mix this, you've got a minute or two to get this on the actual parts. But you've got the strength of it being a resin, and you've also got some slight flexibility with polyurethane resin. So what I like to do is paint a very thin coat on, so this will drop into all the little creases and little areas that are defected. it fills them. And obviously because it dries so quickly, it starts to thicken up toward the end. And as it starts to thicken up, if you have got any gouges or anything that need filling, you can put it in there. You don't need a perfectly neat finish. And what it also likes to do is it glues the whole thing together, adding some very good strength. I've done this before on model parts, and I thought I'd try it on 3D printed parts, see if it works, and it does work rather well. However, it is a messy and timely process. But once that's completely dried up after a couple of hours or so, you go back to the rasp step. The reason we're going back to the rasp step is, as you can see, there's slight areas where the liquid, when it's been very thin, has poured a little bit, or it's started to run down the handguard. What you're doing is repeating the first step so you can get that smoothness back, but you've now got a little bit of strength. Repeat this 2 or 3 times. Once you've repeated that 2 or 3 times and got that prep work done, let's get on to painting. Now this takes a hell of a long time. Give it a good nice coat of a matte black or a grey primer, and that'll start filling in all them very fine inconsistencies. Once you've got that fully coated, again, let that dry, give it a good few hours to dry properly. And as you can see, it's a lot better is the finish, but it's nowhere near showroom ready. Once you've actually let that fully cure, we need to start going on this with slightly rough sandpaper, so around 100 grit, and rubbing this down. Now this is where you need to be a bit more careful. I like to go across and try and do the same sort of work that I was doing with the rasp. But what you're doing is you're smoothing the paintwork out, and you're trying to get it so the paint starts to fill in all them slight undulations of the handguard. I had to repeatedly do this about 6 times, and I got absolutely fed up. I went down to about 200 grit sandpaper towards the end, and the finish is a lot better, but it's nowhere near perfect. And this is what I mean about 3D printing your own parts. Like, basically, if you want to spend nearly a whole day doing this just on a handguard with drying times and sanding and everything, then yeah, go on, have a go at it. It's fun, and it feels like you've achieved something at the end of it. But I'm still not 100% happy with the overall finish. I would like to put another 2 or 3 layers of paint on this and sanding and everything else to get it to where I want it. But for airsoft purposes and how knackered and horrible my gun looks, I'm not too bothered. It adds to the overall rough aesthetic of my airsoft gun that I use on a daily basis. So let's talk about costings. Basically, I wanted that sort of Monk Customs front handguard. They cost about €80, which is what, about 65, 70 pounds? And I've got that look from 3D printing it. The filament that I've used, I've probably used about 200 grams in total on everything. It's cost 22 quid for 2 kilos, so there's a few quid there. The resins and everything else that I've used is £25 in resin. There's a full spray can, which was 7 quid. Then there's your tools and everything else. It's not worth it if you are just going to print a couple of things for yourself. Now, you do have everything, so you could continually, repeatedly make things for yourself, but they're going to be nowhere near as good. Me, I'll keep 3D printing stuff for things like temporary thread adapters. Stuff for weird guns that you just cannot buy, that the community's made to put things together. Is 3D printing good for airsoft? Yeah, but be real about it. If you've liked this video, guys, please drop us a comment, share the video, and let's get your insight into it. Me, it's a fun process and it's a nice little hobby, but if I want something that's going to be good, strong and reliable, would I 3D print something? Probably not.